One of the crazier weeks in DC in recent crazy weeks, or is that just the perception that we have up here?
Oh, I think it's one of the craziest weeks we've seen, especially given the latest information in today's press conferences regarding the classified information to Russia. So every week we think we can't outdo ourselves, but every week we prove ourselves wrong.
So talk about the last couple of days, the sort of 24, 48 hours in which the Washington Post puts out a story saying that President Trump had divulged classified information when Russian officials were at the White House. And that story was immediately discredited by the White House. Let's just go step by step here. When you first heard this and sort of how things started moving quickly, what was your initial reaction?
So initially I was stunned because if it's true, that would be something that no sitting president has ever done. The idea that classified information would be leaked not only beyond members of Congress or elected officials that the White House depends on, but to the Russians was in and of itself bizarre. Beyond that, the alleged incident happened the day after Donald Trump fired Jim Comey, or 2 days after that, and admitted that the Russia investigation was part of the reason behind the firing. So it just seemed like it was so politically impossible for that to happen that I was initially skeptical.
So, Washington Post, obviously one of those news organizations that's come under the ire of President Trump. But then even 24 hours of that, we saw the reversal almost from the president himself, basically tweeting, and after the administration denied that any information was given to the Russians, he pretty much owned up to it.
Right, and this is part of the Trump playbook. He puts his people out there to deny, deny, deny. They then make themselves fall on the sword for Donald Trump, and then via Twitter, 24 hours later, he decides that he's going to own up to the allegations, which makes his staff and surrogates look incredibly incompetent, and it reinvigorates the debate and the discussion. So now the issue is basically, what did he show them, and to what extent should we be concerned that that classified information was shared, and what is the message that's going to be sent to our allies from whom we apparently had gotten that information in the first place?
And that's the kind of the billion-dollar question as to exactly the information that was shared, because let's not forget, he did welcome, in one public ceremony at least, officials to the Oval Office in which Russian media was invited, but American press wasn't. So, again, this leak of how this even came to pass, if American press wasn't there, are we just in uncharted territories in terms of the lack of access that press has in the Trump White House?
Well, I think we are, but what is mitigating that somewhat is the fact that the people who have access to the Trump White House are not particularly loyal. So given that he's done such a good job keeping the media out, every time one of these leaks emerges, it's coming from one of his own people. And that, I think, is particularly telling. The other thing I should note here is that the kind of information that was shared is information that the overwhelming majority of members of Congress, both in the House and Senate, never have access to. So you have a lot of senators sort of shaking their heads saying they don't even know what the content of it could possibly be because it's not information to which they've ever been granted access. So the level of uncertainty is certainly bothersome to a lot of people. And then the extent to which this violates norms of foreign policy is an additional layer.
And again, like everything else we've seen out of the Trump administration, is this just the media vacuum at this point in terms of what national press at least is paying attention to coming out of Washington? It's interesting when we talk about how long these things have legs for. Is this going to continue for the next 24 hours, do you think?
Well, one thing that could make it stop is if something new comes out. So, for example, if Trump decides to fire a bunch of people, or if a new scandal emerges, he's done an excellent job demonstrating that he's able to sort of motivate the media to move on to the next thing, because the next thing is always so stunning and shocking. But the reason I think this probably does have legs is because it's part of this broader Russia problem, right? And that's what Trump himself calls it, the Trump-Russia problem. So anytime there's an aspect of a scandal or something that looks like it reeks of the perception of impropriety and it's linked to Russia, it's very difficult to make that go away.
So, it's an interesting relationship that the president has with Russia. I mean, we've seen, excuse me here as I grab a drink of water. I was just outside at the PASOX press conference in Pawtucket, and woo, it's warm up here. Do you think a lot of, can we just not predict Trump's interaction with Russia? Is again, his unpredictability the only thing that we can predict coming out of this administration?
Yes. Beyond the fact that we can't predict what he's telling Russia or what that relationship will be, there's now evidence that he is willing to sacrifice his staff to lie about it. And I think that's particularly concerning. You know, people, when they look back on the George W. Bush White House, even if they completely disagreed with all of his policies and all of his issues and all of his preferences, they felt, one, he was surrounded by people that were really actually playing a key role and informing his views, and two, that he actually had the best interests of the United States at heart. And I think now we're beginning to see people doubt both of those things from the Trump administration, and that's what makes it a little bit different, and that's what makes him a different kind of Republican.
And of course, we've seen lots of reports that will there be more shakeups with Comey being out? Will Spicer be next? Will Bannon be next? You know, have we ever seen sort of this, you kind of alluded to this level of uncertainty by his own staff members that they might not, do they think they might not even have a job tomorrow?
Oh, I mean, I think that he cultivates this sense of fear for your own job. And maybe in the business world, that breeds some degree of loyalty. I think in the political world, it breeds a level of uncertainty that puts these people in really, really awkward positions and basically threatens their future job prospects. I mean, who's going to hire Sean Spicer at this point? Trump has basically made him into complete mush. Dana Milbank had a great column in the Washington Post today where he shows pretty compellingly that everybody that Trump has sort of taken on and associated himself with winds up bearing the brunt of Trump's actions, and Trump gets away with it. And so if Steve Bannon or Sean Spicer or McGahn or any of these other guys wind up losing their jobs, it's likely because they were not able to portray to the media Trump as he wanted himself portrayed. But he gives them very, very few ingredients to do it.
And what's the word now with the post-Comey fallout, if you will? Obviously, a lot of attention being paid on what transpired between Trump and the Russians, but could that in itself be a distraction as they're trying to figure out the next power structure at the FBI?
Absolutely, and we've already seen the Trump administration release the names of 6 or 8 people that they're considering for FBI director. One of them was Senator Cornyn from Texas. He's now taken himself out of the running because the word around here was that even Republicans believe that this should be an agency run by somebody that's not explicitly political, especially given the kinds of investigations that they'll be charged with doing. And so I don't think that Donald Trump is going to get his way on this one, but it's certainly going to be a fight that he's demonstrating a willingness to have.
And do you think that again goes to the Trump administration and to the man himself, as you said, going as far as appointing someone, not appointing, putting up the name of someone political? You know, as you said, wouldn't anyone have assumed that a president would never even think of that at first blush because of the impropriety that it would bring?
Right. I think that's exactly right. And Trump has shown us time and again that he doesn't care about norms. The other thing I would note here is that this administration really is playing out like the next season of The Apprentice. It wasn't only when he was trying to audition candidates for Secretary of State, but even these firings are done in such dramatic ways. The notion that Jim Comey found out that he was fired because CNN reported it on a television screen behind him while he was meeting with staff in Los Angeles is something that a screenwriter wouldn't even come up with. So the shock value is not only substantive, but the delivery is also inconsistent with what we're accustomed to from the White House.
And, you know, as we're looking at this and watching what's happening with the FBI and what's happening in the Trump White House, obviously one of the bigger questions is, how does this impact domestic policy, specifically as the Senate is continuing to take up health care and also looking potentially at tax reform?
Well, my sense, and the sense of a lot of people down here, I think, is that the domestic policy agenda for this year is now officially shot. Nothing's going to happen. The Senate already said that they were going to move very, very slowly on health care because they do want to craft a bill that they think could ultimately get, if not bipartisan support, then at least unified Republican support. And until that bill is crafted, tax reform can only move so far, and we haven't heard anything about the stimulus. All of these distractions are terrible in terms of the domestic policy agenda. As far as Democrats are concerned, and as far as the Barack Obama legacy is concerned, they're all pretty good news because the status quo is a status quo that the Democrats were pretty okay with.
Well, we're continuing to keep all eyes on what's taking place down there. Obviously, Trump and Russia, I mean, will continue to dominate And it was interesting. I believe we had our conversation just this time last week when we were kind of talking about Comey, and it was literally happening as we were having this discussion. So something could be happening right now, and we'll be talking about it next week.
It's true. Sean Spicer might be out of the job. Who knows?
Well, it's interesting. It seems every day there's speculation as again, who's next to go. And of course, there were the reports that Kellyanne Conway said something to the host at Morning Joe. Did you see that report that maybe she wasn't even supportive of her own boss?
I think they've all alluded to the fact that everything that Donald Trump says and does is not necessarily what they would have done or how they would have done it. But you notice that everybody walks a very fine line because they don't want to lose their jobs. It's the same thing with Republicans in the Senate. If you watch the Sunday morning shows, if you watch cable news and you see these guys talk to anchors about Donald Trump, they're all so careful about saying that they need more information and they want to investigate and this doesn't seem right, but they all stop short of saying what he did is wrong. And I think in part it's because until 80% of Republican voters are not in favor of Donald Trump, these people are worried about their own reelection prospects. And Donald Trump understands that.
Absolutely. We're going to continue to be keeping a close eye on 18 here. As someone who'd run for office up here in Rhode Island, you know we're gearing up for that, gearing up for our gubernatorial, looking at mayoral race, and of course the assembly up here. State Rep Bobby Nardolillo just tossed his hat in the ring to run against Sheldon Whitehouse. So, you know, we're already in cycle here. As you said, the Trump factor will be a very interesting one, especially nationally, probably much more so than Rhode Island, but something that we will continue to watch. So is it all research all the time now that school's out down there, Jennifer?
For another couple of weeks, and then I think I'll take a little bit of a break.
And I hear that you might be up in Rhode Island, so hopefully we will get you in studio when that happens. We would love to see you here.
I hope so, and me too.
Okay, Jennifer Lawless down in